Welcome, everyone, to Slave Food Conversations, where two African American physicians explore the role of racism as a unique form of stress and the weaponization of food in the creation of health disparities in African American communities, irrespective of income. They discover eating a whole food, plant-based diet in urban communities is not only possible, but is the key to eliminating health disparities. Dr. Columbus Batiste is an interventional cardiologist in Southern California. Dr. Batiste is a passionate double board certified interventional cardiologist who has incorporated the power of a whole food plant-based diet combined with exercise and stress reduction in his management of patients. Dr. Eric Walsh serves as medical director for urgent care services. Dr. Walsh has a double doctorate in medicine and public health. Dr. Walsh is passionate about educating people on ways to improve their mental, physical, and spiritual health. As a result, he has taken his God-given talents across the world and has given lectures and sermons on every continent. Throughout June, Men's Health Month aims to encourage boys and men to take charge of their overall health by implementing healthy living decisions. In general, men in the U.S. are expected to live nearly 6 years less than women, and non-Hispanic Blacks and American, Indian, Alaskan Native men have a lower life expectancy than non-Hispanic white men. Many diseases that disproportionately impact men, like heart disease and cancer, are preventable through regular doctor's visits and healthy lifestyle choices. However, one survey found that 63% of men of color report not getting regular health screenings. Men are also more likely to have lower health literacy levels than women, meaning they may struggle to find understanding and use information and services required to make informed decisions about their health. Today, the doctors talk about these situations and provide solutions on how to make it better. Welcome, doctors. Enjoy the show.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Man, it's a while since we've had Miss Danette out here introducing us. How you doing?
Very true. But doing well. It's nice and warm, and summer's amazing in New England, so it's good times.
Oh, that's good. We've had some June gloom out here, but thankful for sunlight today. It's been good stuff.
Good.
It's been good stuff. How's your June been so far, though? I mean,
so far so good. I mean, our company adopted Juneteenth. So Monday was like a holiday at our company. All of our clinics closed early. Appreciative of that. And I think gave everybody a chance to kind of reflect on what that means. And more importantly, as a lot of them were saying, is what do we do next? How do we build a better America? And how do we continue to grow in terms of justice and equality?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, when we look at this sort of a thing here, we're in a process of really trying to recover, still at this day and age. And at the foundation of everything, we're really looking at our health. And so the health span is really the building blocks, I believe, towards like all of the aspects of financial and educational and environmental, is that we have to have our health if we don't have anything else. That's extremely important. So so let's jump into this. We have some interesting stuff. Danette gave us a great intro into a lot of this already, as we're kind of looking at this idea of men's health, and one of the things here, I'm gonna move over to the side. See, we're trying out something new with the deck here.
Make sure we don't get cuts off my name, but I guess it's like
we're gonna have to move that. We'll move it around a little bit there.
It's all good.
No, there you go. We don't want your name cut off. We want everyone to know who you are. If they don't know, now they know. But we say all the time in here, we always say what? We always talk about people living sicker and dying sooner, the African Americans living sicker and dying sooner. But what's so interesting is the fact that when you start really parsing through the literature, you see that men actually are living sicker and dying sooner. And that's interesting, right? Because so much attention has been drawn to the disparities in research with women, the lack thereof, the lack of medicine really being targeted towards women, and we see a lot of deficiencies. But we also recognize now increasingly that we're seeing this deficit that exists.
No, there is a real deficit. Things are changing fast. women, as far as I'm concerned, are doing better in society overall. There's a long way still to go for sure. But there are a lot of men who, I talk to as patients and as colleagues sometimes, and they don't know where they fit in society anymore like they used to. A lot of men are finding a crisis. I think, as usual, women often are better at kind of galvanizing and having a focus. And I think for a lot of men, as the world changes, a lot of men don't know where they fit in. And you're seeing more anxiety. You're seeing, obviously, suicide rates have always been highest among white men. We're seeing an increase in suicide rates among Black men now, young Black men even. So some interesting things are happening. And so this isn't just about physical disease. This is about emotional health, mental health, and even spiritual health as we deal with the things that we have to deal with in this time.
No, you're absolutely right. We're seeing it. I mean, I put these 2 slides up here just because, I mean, we always talk about, just like when we talk about slave food, those of you who are not new to this show, you recognize that we speak about the perils of that we can't escape. Really, our finances don't eliminate our risk for death or illness. And so we've all heard of the recent tragedy of Jamie Foxx, at least the mysterious illness, the illness that struck him, that seems to have disabled him, where he's unable to kind of be out in public. And there's a lot of wild speculations that are going on. But I think the one thing that is clear is that he's not well. He's not well. And you juxtapose that with the likes of Lance Reddick, the actor, another actor too as well, who, to be honest with you, he looked the image of health.
I know.
He looked the image of health. I mean, he was fit. He had the appearance. He looked youthful in appearance, but yet still something was simmering underneath that we just don't know that happened with him.
And this, we've shown other celebrities over the years, everyone from Heavy D to Whitney Houston to Bernie Mac. So the point of it initially when we did it was to show that even when you have wealth, it doesn't mean that you have health for African Americans. And these stories just continue to kind of show that. I have no idea what happened to Jamie Foxx, but obviously it was significant. And so, we obviously are praying and wishing him well.
Absolutely.
There has to be a very intentional move to be healthy. That's really, really important.
Yeah, and I think that's the clear thing is the fact that there is. I mean, Jeanette summed it up well. I mean, there was a recent article that came out towards the end of last year, and it's been kind of picked up around this time right now about the widening gap in terms of disparities in longevity between men and women. As now it's nearly 6 years across the lifespan, looking at the longevity gap between men and women in the United States. And we've always kind of known that. I mean, if I look back, I mean, it's been 12 years since my dad passed away, and my mom is still, thank the Lord, is still moving on. She's 88 and still humming.
Your mother looks good when I see her every time.
Yeah. I'm gonna tell you, man, sometimes I look at her, I'm like, man, this woman is 88. She's up here walking around real fast and trying to take care of me. Do you have?
I'm about to say, when I go there, she's making food. She's entertaining. Yeah.
Listen, bro, she just was cooking right now. I was like, Mom, I feel like some tofu scramble, and she was in the kitchen right now making me some tofu scramble right there, and greens, whatever it is I need to kind of maintain that plant-rich food substance that I need.
And she eats healthy. I mean, that's one thing.
She does. She does.
I appreciate that about her.
She does. And I think all these things play a role in it. But, we'll get into this a little bit more about some of the other aspects of her life that maybe most men don't partake of. They don't do. But when we look at this gap, this is a crazy part about this slide that I saw is the fact that mortality is markedly elevated across the board when you look at the ratio of disease that's there. Just exponential when you look at the male to female death rates across ages in the U.S. in other countries. We just see this gap that's above 1. It's much higher across the board. So it's not just the U.S. So we're seeing something is going on. Something is amiss that's there. And the key thing is not just in adults. This was the crazy part about some of the research recently is that they're seeing it in kids, that there's a difference in males and females, and there's no great explanation for it, that the mortality rate is higher for boys than it is for girls and for teens too as well. So just interesting as to what's going on. Statistics. I mean, you're a public health guy, you know. I mean, this is your. I mean, what do you think? What's at the heart of this?
So if you look at the first part of this statement, death rates for boys and teens ages 10 to 19 far outpace that for girls. And you can look at it, it's more than double that rate. And one of the things, of course, with boys aged 10 to 19 is the accidents,
yes,
suicides, and much of that is related to risk-taking behavior that is more prevalent in that age range for boys than it is for girls. But if you look at the bottom one, you realize that can't be all it is, because even among infants, the mortality rate is higher for boys than for girls. Obviously, that's a much narrower difference. Right. But female babies actually do better overall. And of course, once you get into teen years, boys ride motorcycles. Boys ride, not that girls don't, but boys ride more motorcycles. They may even ride more aggressively, you could argue. And so those things, car accidents, drugs, alcohol, homicide, suicide. So it speaks to that, again, it goes back to speaking to that mental health and emotional health piece as well.
Yeah, no, important. I mean, this is one that's close to home. We look at, for men in general, I think we look at the issues of diabetes and just the rates, but not just the rates, looking at the death as a result of diabetes. And I think in the next few slides, we're going to see, I mean, what really plays a role with it? Is it an issue that we hide, that we don't want to look and peer underneath the covers of our health and see what's going on? We ignore symptoms. We wait until things really erupt in terms of it. But death is hard.
And I think for this one, there's something you just said that I think is there's something really important. One, obviously, this gentleman is not he's still alive.
Yes,
I think
yes.
Out and he does the commercial saying that he has diabetes, or he makes the statements that he has diabetes. But for men, one of the problems is that there is a machismo a little bit, kind of like, okay, I don't want to admit I'm vulnerable. I don't want people to see me as weak. And all of us, including myself, I'll be honest, you just don't want to find out something wrong. You almost think like ignorance is bliss.
Mm-hmm.
I think we as men are more likely to do that than women are. Whereas women, a lot of times, because of the nature of being a woman, with the way that they have far more interactions with doctors and the healthcare system from their teenage years all the way through life than men do. Because if a man is healthy, quite frankly, after he hits 18 or 19, there isn't a whole lot of reasons to go in to be checked every year. Honestly, I mean, that's the truth.
Yeah,
there's not much you're gonna pick up in a healthy young man. Women, on the other hand, have to get gynecological checks every year, or at least every 2 to 3 years. Once after certain criteria are met, they're gonna have, if they have children, they're gonna have all of those visits. So they sometimes seem to me to be more comfortable with the healthcare system, and of course, women may just be wiser in that regard, like where they're not as worried about looking weak, like men often are. And obviously, there's no absolutes, but I think that plays into this, because the later you pick up diabetes, the more likely you are to die with it.
Yeah, and what's the overall adage is, when you're diagnosed with diabetes, you probably have had it for about 5 years before, at a minimum. And people oftentimes walk around saying, "I just have a little touch of diabetes. Oh, it's just pre-diabetes." And I mean, that's comparable to saying you're just a little bit pregnant. It's an inflammatory state that's percolating inside your body, and many times what's happening is that you have metabolic syndrome. It's a constellation of a lot of little things that add up to a lot in terms of disease risk with you.
This is the one that hurts you and I the most.
Yes.
We see Chadwick Boseman, one of my favorite actors, and not for his role as Black Panther, his role as Jackie Robinson and Thurgood Marshall are the two to me that were really moving because of the historical significance. And in his early 40s, what was he, 42?
Yeah, something like that.
He died of colon cancer, which means that colon cancer would have needed to have been picked up probably in his late 30s, which clearly we don't screen anyone for colon cancer in their 30s. So this slide shows you that the cancer mortality is higher among men, which it's something I don't think most people know.
Correct.
189 per 100,000 to 135.7 per 100,000. And for Black men, I really want our audience to see this: 227.3 per 100,000. There's a lot of things that play into that. Everything from
Yes.
if you're Black, you're more likely to live in a neighborhood where you're going to be breathing in more of the fumes from automobiles because highways were sent through Black neighborhoods.
Yes.
You're more likely to be in a situation where the water quality is not as good, as we've seen in places like Jackson, Mississippi, and Flint, Michigan in the last several years. You're also more likely, in many cases, to have massive advertisement campaigns to you for carcinogens like tobacco, alcohol, and other things.
Ethanol. Yep.
And then, of course, you're disproportionately more likely, as we always talk about, to be in a situation where you're going to be eating foods that are, if they're not cancer promoting, they're not cancer protective. I mean, and so all of these things play together. And of course, our big thing we talk about here on Slave Food, besides plant-based eating, is stress.
Yes.
And the unique nature of stress. So stress lowers your immune system. If you are in a chronic state of fight or flight, if you're being chased by a dog, your body's not putting its energy into your T cells and your white blood cells and protecting you from a virus. It wants you to get away from the dog. If you live in a situation where it's like a dog is always chasing you, then your immune system is going to be chronically lowered. And one of the consequences of that is that it is your immune system that fights cancer or corrects mutated cells and gets rid of them. That could also play into these numbers. So there's a lot of things that go into why you would have this difference.
Absolutely. And just to add, because it's so important, is really all the reasons you just mentioned. We get sleep. There's actually a disparity in sleep. The length of time that you sleep between African Americans and others. When you look at the city, the noise factor that plays a role, increases the risk of cardiovascular disease, the lighting that's there, these all disrupt. Plus, in terms of employment opportunities, educational, that lends itself towards working shift work that perhaps may be less than conducive towards a good night's sleep. This plays a role. When you look at the neighborhood deprivation component, that now when you're saying that you have lack of walkways, lack of trees, lack of the ability to exercise and get out and get sunlight, all of these things play a role and amplify all the carcinogens that Dr. Walsh just mentioned. So it's so significant when we look at these components. And yes, it affects everyone, but we do see a disproportionate that may explain this higher rate, this disproportionate rate in African Americans. Yeah. You just were talking about this suicide rates, depression.
Yes. And this one is a really important slide, and this is one of the great comedian entertainers of the American and global entertainment world. And he died by suicide. Men die by suicide nearly 4 times more often than women. The rate of suicide is highest in middle-aged white men, but teen boys also face a high risk. And we are watching an increase in young African-American men in suicide. And it's recently hit close to home for Columbus and I. And so we know that this is a serious thing. And this has a lot to do with, so we talked a lot about men not wanting to check in, to make sure they're, we talked about prostate cancer in the past, and men often aren't checking in to see that their mental health is right. I'm gonna be a little transparent on the show. This is me sometimes. I've gone through some stuff where I've been in some real stressful situations, even real cases of depression, and not ever even thought to seek to talk to someone. Fortunately for us men, a lot of times we do have women in our lives who will help us to get to where we get counseling and therapy and talk through things. This is one of the ones that, a lot of times, you can take medicine, and there's not, I'm not saying not to take medicine, but I do really want to strongly encourage therapy and a healthy lifestyle in order to lower this risk.
Yeah. I think to your point, I think one of the things is really just that intimacy of relationships. I mean, I think from a societal standpoint, you grow up with this concept of man up, and that, hey, if you're going to be a man, you have to be strong. You have to not show your emotions. Don't cry, right? These are all the things that you're told either directly or indirectly. And so as a result of it, many times relationships are superficial that you may have. You talk about sports. You talk about the latest trade between Chris Paul and the Phoenix Suns and the Bullets, but you don't get down into the stuff that really that sorrows your heart. Your heart is just hurting. It's aching, that you're sitting there. And that's hard.
That is very hard. And I'll put a plug in here for having good men in your family and in your inner circle. I'm a part of a chat on WhatsApp with some guys from the Capitol Hill SDA Church in Washington, D.C. And I'm always impressed by how this men's ministry at that church, these guys really support each other. I mean, they cry together. And I say, every man should have a group like that, somewhere, somehow, that they can, I've seen these guys come to me like, listen, I'm having a bad day. I'm having a hard time. I don't know how I'm gonna make it. And these guys, pray for one another. They people call them instantly. Sometimes they drive over and visit them. And this all happens in real time in this WhatsApp chat. I don't live in the DC area, but I was like, man, if I ever did, I'd make sure I'm in with these brothers, because, sometimes you need that. And to your point, as men, sometimes we feel like I'm not supposed to need that.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe
it's like it's a weakness if you expose that, right?
And
you're somehow not a man.
I do believe men should be strong. I'm not a part of the movement now where you try and make men weak and make them soft. But true strength comes from being transparent at times, from having some sense of vulnerability, so that you don't let your pain become a hindrance, right? So you have, in order to truly be strong, you've got to show your weakness sometimes. I mean, scripturally, it said, the Apostle Paul says, "When I am weak, then am I strong." It's in our weaknesses. You see, strengths. A leadership training I got once says, strengths overused become weaknesses, right? Weaknesses unaddressed become fatal.
Yeah.
So, you can't just say, well, I'm a strong man, so I'm never going to be weak. That's just not reality. I mean, we saw that in, you think of the NBA playoffs we just went through. And the way that, some of the strong teams you thought would not make it all the way through, they didn't make it through. Yeah. And so you got to be willing to say, you know what, I'm not doing well right now. I need some help. That's real strength. That's real strength.
On the movie tip, what was it? Eminem inside of 8 Mile, he called out all of his weaknesses, right? In order so he could be strong in that moment. Sometimes you have to call out like your weaknesses, and it's okay. It's okay. But, across the board, we brought up statistics like this, but this is looking specifically at men and comparing different type of men compared to women, and seeing the disproportionate amount of risk and so forth that's there across the board. Heart disease, African Americans more so than Caucasians and Hispanics and Asians. We've talked about this before. The statistics in LA, longevity, the disease burden that we see on a regular basis, that includes high blood pressure, right? We know high blood pressure is 50-60% of African Americans carry high blood pressure, and it's a predominant issue that exists, Cancer, we just talked about cancer. And then the interesting part is that even during COVID, when you looked at the COVID pandemic and other infectious issues, men were more inclined to die and have issues than women during that period of time. And so we see this across the board. And I think it gets to your point, Eric. You talked about going to doctor's visits. And so interesting study, this study kind of looking at that women 40% more likely, right, to see physicians. But here's the thing, even when they normalized it and they said, let's take out the regular female checkups for pap smears and so forth.
Gynecological reasons.
Yep. There still was an increased use. And so the question is, are women overusing it, or are men underutilizing the resources?
I think men underutilize it.
We're underutilizing. Absolutely. We will take care of our cars. Taking that Porsche, taking that BMW in to get service, detailed. We're out there. What happens during Father's Day? We just came out of. Let's get a car show. Get all the rides, and the dads are rolling out in their cars that they have meticulous, but they haven't taken their body to get checked up once. And that's the hard part. When we look at the aspect, I'm gonna tell you, we just came. So the nonprofit Healthy Heart Nation, we started doing a blood pressure project, going into barbershops, going into churches, and going to beauty salons, and working with IEHP is ensuing a collaboration to kind of spread that a little bit more. So we were at an event inside of California, and we were doing blood pressure screens, roughly somewhere around 100 to 200 blood pressure screenings. I can't tell you, it must have been at least 50% of people, their blood pressure in these African-American educated individuals was elevated. But it wasn't. Here's the part that got me. They weren't shocked. They're like, "Oh, doc, that's good. 160 over 90. Oh man, that's good for me." I said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Did you know you have high blood pressure?" "Oh yeah, I'm on medication." "Did you take your medication today?" "No, I ain't taking my medication today." "Why not?" I said, "Do you realize that what you're doing, that's like getting in your car, start it up, you see that little sign that says your tire pressure is low, and you still choose to drive without putting at least air in it. Now, the air that you put in it doesn't fix the tire, but at least it protects you.
Protect the rim.
Yes. So we need to at least protect you, right? And then work on the lifestyle to help see if we can prevent this, something to that degree. But just the number of people who are exposing themselves to the risk of stroke, to the risk of heart failure, to the risk of kidney failure. I mean, it's just, it really hurt my heart just thinking about it. And I really left out of that a little bit demoralized of wondering, man, what do I need to do? I literally felt exhausted after talking and counseling people, person after person after person, about the perils of them having the blood pressure unchecked like that.
A lot of people they believe, there's a lot of anti-medicine being pushed. And I'm with you in not wanting to take medicine or be reliant on the medical system, as long as you're going to do what it takes to not have to be. But if you're going to eat the way you always eat, not exercise, then you at least got to take the pills. So,
here's truth is it needs to be a seesaw effect. I know people out there don't know about the seesaw. Back in the day, that's why I used to get down on the seesaw like that. So as you go up on your lifestyle, there is a chance the medication use may go down. It doesn't guarantee it's going to go away, but I really feel strongly we have to move away from seeing modern medicine as a scarlet letter. And so we put this scarlet letter, like if I have to take a pill, that it's a scarlet letter. And that's wrong. But the key is we should first promote lifestyle. All the stuff we speak about on this platform on a regular basis. But guess what? There's going to be some people who still have to take medication despite doing everything right.
That's right.
And so the question comes in, how can we best lower your risk? And we're waging odds. What's the likelihood that something adverse is going to happen? So I'll tell you a personal story, right? Without divulging too much, from a family member. They developed a certain condition. Now, it was a condition of an irregular heartbeat. And this irregular heartbeat was one called atrial fibrillation that can increase the likelihood of them developing a stroke. I'm not taking that. I didn't know about it. This increases the risk of stroke. They chose, no, I will not take that medication. I don't want to put that in my body, I'm presuming. And so what unfortunately happened was that they developed a stroke that now alters their life for the rest of their life.
Because was it like a blood thinner that they wouldn't take?
Correct. For atrial fibrillation, for a regular heartbeat.
Because when they'll tell you, I've heard people tell me it's rat poison. I'm like,
correct. And the issue is the fact that the consequence, we have to weigh the pros and cons of all of our decisions. And we have to look at not just about the impact on ourselves. What's the collateral impact on our family? What's the impact of us choosing a certain direction and ignoring the options that are placed in front of you? I believe that we're blessed. We live in a day and age in which we do have a high degree of technology, a high degree of knowledge that's there. I think that we overuse it personally, but I think that it has its place.
It definitely has its place.
It has its place.
I tell people all the time, if you don't believe it has its place, get pneumonia and don't take an antibiotic. Or get an infected cut or wound and don't take an antibiotic. So there's a place for it. Obviously, we don't want people taking medication if they don't need it, which is why we really do push a whole food, plant-based diet and all the lifestyle things we talk about. But you can't walk around with a blood pressure of 190 over 110 all the time and say, I'm not taking medicine because it's bad for me. Well, and you've got to find a way to get that blood pressure down naturally, because if not, it's going to kill you.
Correct. And hope that the natural will work. And that's the thing. When we look at men, and this is a funny part from an article I read, they talked about that doctors say that men are most likely to visit because of a sports injury or a Viagra visit.
And that's changed now that they've got these online like Roman or some of these other things. People don't even got to go in to get Viagra. And I think that's dangerous.
It's
I remember they
very
reached out
dangerous.
to try and recruit me to work on to do that from virtually. I said I won't do that because if someone needs Viagra, it's the canary in the. We've talked about this on the show before. It's the canary in the coal mine that they may have significant atherosclerotic disease, and they could be on their way to a heart attack or stroke. You give them this, and now they can have an erection, but that don't fix what's wrong with their heart, and so you literally sent them to go have a heart attack.
That's right. I mean, listen, you brought it up, so I'm going to go ahead and walk through that door. You opened it. You cracked it open. But penile arteries are about half the size of the arteries of the heart. So you can imagine if you're slurping through a little coffee stirrer straw, something's going to get stuck in that before something gets stuck inside of a large boba straw. And so we know that. We know 67% of men who have chest pain and documented heart disease, they also have evidence of erectile dysfunction. That, some have even equated erectile dysfunction as like penile angina. And the worst part is they talk about 40% of men over the age of 40 have some form of erectile dysfunction. And we see this if you present with erectile dysfunction, which means either an inability to have a firm erection or a partial erection or no erection, you're a 50-fold increased risk of having heart disease. That's how significant this is.
50-fold. Wow.
50-fold increase. So when you talk about going in, I think the best way to get to men, and you brought up something I hadn't even thought about with the hymns and all these other things like that, is that you have to measure the blood pressure, right? You have to measure blood pressure, your diabetes,
prescribe your medicine over the phone or on Zoom.
All. I mean, yeah, it's crazy. I think ED should equal early death. That's really what it amounts to, right? Unless we
live in a society that's so sick. I teach at a university here, and I was talking to the class about it today. And I was telling them, I said, we've just assumed that we understand what food is. Like we don't even know what food is anymore. It's so normal to have a poor lifestyle and poor health outcomes that a man at 45 would have erectile dysfunction and just think, oh, it's natural. Let me just get some Viagra and not ask how at 45 am I, like this, that's not supposed to happen at 45. It's not really ever supposed to happen. No. So, if it's happening, nobody's asking why. They just reach for the blue pill, and don't look at it. So, a few minutes ago, we were talking about blood pressure. Your blood pressure is high. You don't want to take medicine. This happens and folk are happy to go and take
Run into it.
Yeah,
it's what's important to you. We always talk about resources go where value is placed.
Yep.
Right. Same sort of thing. You're going to go ahead and pour into something where there's value. And I get it. Right. I get it. I'm not chastising you for that being important to you, but I'm chastising you for you not looking at the underlying cause as to why this may be occurring. Either it's a mental issue, maybe there's depression, maybe there's stress, maybe there's anxiety. Right? A psychological component to ED. Maybe there's an actual issue that's arising as it relates to something else that's going on in terms of your body of diabetes or high blood pressure, which all increase the likelihood or vascular disease. And so it's extremely important.
And I think here we got to put a plug in for the women. And when they see some of these things happening in their men, whether it's the high blood pressure or the erectile dysfunction, you have got to almost hold them by the hand and lead them into a doctor's office where the doctor is going to really look at them and try and figure out what's the root cause is, speak to them about lifestyle, and at the same time make sure they get the medicines they need until if and when the lifestyle reverses the condition. But to just stay there the way you are is really, it just sets off a timer where, till something really bad happens.
Yeah. And it's we're caught up, men are caught up. Generally, their manhood is tied to this. Right. It's tied to this. And so people will forego surgery for prostate cancer if needed. They will forego everything to hold on to their manhood as it relates to it. And so we need to encourage folks that your manhood is more than just that. Right.
Very good point. Very good point.
It's important. So, I think, speaking of like, what do you do? How do we go about it? I think it's important to kind of really look at like, what are the screening recommendations? And we all should really have our blood pressure checked at least kind of once a year, on the regular basis. You going in, you need to kind of get your tire pressure checked every so often. Make sure the pressure in your tire is good, right? That's why they have the automated checks, because people weren't doing it. So we tell people now, since you're not going to the doctor's office, get yourself a blood pressure machine at home. Teach you how to use it. Bring it into your doctor's office once a year and make sure the numbers are right. That's what I encourage you to do.
And you've said this before, Columbus. It's more those at-home readings. You've mentioned this on the show before. Those at-home readings are actually more important than the in-office readings.
Yes.
If you got a random blood pressure check at like a health fair, like you guys just did, and it's normal, that's fine. If it's elevated, you actually need 2 or 3 more within a 2-week period, and you need to take those numbers from home into your doctor's office so that a diagnosis of hypertension can be made. So.
No, I couldn't agree more. You know, same thing with cholesterol. It's important. We've moved over to this idea of your cardiovascular risk assessment too as well. We know our weight, we know our waist circumference. I always jump down from weight to waist circumference, right? That's always the telltale. Forget about the weight, right? Everyone's like, my BMI, I'm big bone, the this, that, and the other. Our waist is important. Just the waist circumference is extremely important, but the blood sugar as well. And then make sure that, there's some discussion, from physicians. This is targeted to physicians about having some discussion about those other risk factors, sedentary behavior. I know my patients still look at me crazy when they see me, and they're like, why are you asking me about my sleep? I'm here to have an angiogram. And I have to connect the dots for them so they understand the risk that exists as a result of it. So this is an example of what your docs may do when they're assessing you, really trying to figure out what your risk burden is like. It's not just solely looking at the numbers, but they're looking at everything as a whole: blood pressure, your cholesterol levels, and they're trying to estimate a risk. If your risk is over 7.5% risk of having a heart attack or a stroke, then there's concerns that we have, and they may discuss with you about a statin. But the more important thing is that you get aggressive with lifestyle. We talked about this already in terms of depression. Screening is important, and really having someone just to kind of communicate with. Prostate screening is important. This is the key, right? You would say is what we know: over the age of 50 for sure, 45 if you're African American, family history, or even the BRCA gene inside your family, that you're over 40, really kind of getting that screening done on a regular basis. Some would say getting digital rectal plus the PSA. Now, do you do these a lot inside of urgent care?
We don't do this. We don't do these at all.
But I'm asking that for a particular reason, right?
We refer these folk back to their PCPs to get this done.
Exactly. And so people, a lot of times, how many people do you see that are probably using your office as a primary care office?
None of them. There's a lot of discussion around how we could be used to help with screenings like this. So obviously, if I'm in there seeing patients, I definitely tell people, hey, when was there, you're diabetic, or what, I don't see a recent hemoglobin A1C, I try and send them to where they can get help. So this is one of those things that they got to get checks for. Colonoscopies, hey, you're 60 years old. When was your last colon screening? Try to ask things like that.
No, I mean, that's important, because I think people take, well, why I need to go see that doctor? I just took care of my problem. Why I have to go back to see the other doctor? They're just going to refer me over. Yeah. But that other doctor is like your head coach. They're your manager. They're coordinating all the pieces,
Absolutely.
I mean, what were they getting on? They were getting on the Boston Celtics. Sorry, guys, I keep talking about sports. I love basketball, but they're just getting on the Boston Celtics coach, and they were getting on what's the coach from Miami Heat? Spoelstra. So I was listening to Dwayne Wade in an interview. He was like, man, when Spoelstra first came in, he could not coach. He was calling timeouts the wrong spot, and the in-game situations weren't quite there. And that's the situation, is the fact that the quarterback, the head coach, they're supposed to be able to coordinate all those in-game situations, going to urgent care, ED, all those things, and be able to kind of tie it all together to make sure that you're well and healthy. So, I mean, I put this slide on. We're going to bring Danette back on when she's ready here too as well. Any lasting questions she may have, or others out there. We talk about why does it matter? Because it matters to our families, man. It matters to our kids. And you don't want to work all these years and then you don't even get your retirement. Someone else is getting it. All right. We talk about that too. The lack of financial, we don't get to reap the benefits at all. So it's important. And I'll say this last about the crying part. And so Dr. Quentin Cancel brought this to my attention, so I had to go and research it. Really, and you probably knew this already, Eric, because you're a smart dude. But just the power from crying. And the power from crying to release stress, to lower the stress hormones, to actually increase oxytocin, to actually repair and restore the body and highlight that parasympathetic activation, which is the tend and befriend, that all these things are beneficial. But when we suppress it, that's when problems happen, you know. And I was sharing a scenario there with my daughter here recently, where she was graduating from high school. So my daughter just graduated from high school, and so
Congrats.
I was yeah, thanks, man. It's first step. It's important. It's an important step on the long journey. But I was sitting there waiting for people to come in. I had their tickets, and I started just welling up. I started getting emotional, kind of there, thinking about her as a small child and holding her. And I fought back. I'm like, I can't. I'm not crying. I'm not crying. These people walking in here. I'm not crying. I'm just holding it back. I go sit down. I'm still a little bit on edge. And my wife looks over at me because she knows me, right? She knows me. She looks over and she's like, "You're not crying, are you?" "No, I'm not crying. I'm not crying. I'm a man. I'm not crying." Right. And so it's okay to cry. So I released it while I was on Peloton. I was riding with Robin, and I was riding with Tunde, and I'm crying with sweat pouring down my eyes because I had to get it out there somehow. So I'm just here to tell you that, yes, I'm a real man. In case you didn't know, I'm a real man, and real men cry sometimes, and it's okay.
It's absolutely okay. The Bible says Jesus wept.
That's right.
So
that's right.
You gotta be willing to let it go. There is a true stress relieving component to it.
Yes.
And it bonds. Some people argue, why do humans cry? You know, animals don't cry like we do.
Empathy.
Part of it is the way it connects us to other people. So
yes.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Okay, so I've got some questions here, and just some of them maybe are just some summaries. But what would you all say are the top health concerns of men?
Number one right now is heart disease. Okay. And then cancer would probably be the second one in general. But I think both of those are undergirded by mental health issues because of the way stress plays into both of them. So those three things are the top three things, but, you know, lifestyle in general, you know, as a protective factor. But I would say as diseases, those are the three areas you'd want to focus on.
Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. All right. So what type of health screenings can people do themselves without going to a doctor? Are there some screenings that they can do at home?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You mind sharing them?
we mentioned waist circumference. That's actually an excellent one. You can keep track of that over time. Hip, waist, and do your hip and your waist, get the ratio. Obviously, you can do blood pressure at home now. You can even learn to take your pulse or get an Apple Watch, make it even easier. Mm-hmm. An Apple Watch will keep a lot of that information for you and regularly do it. Probably more important than trying to like keep track of like screening yourself. I still have not taken the Apple Watch dive because I like watches, but I've seen where it really has helped motivate people to get their steps in, get their exercise. It has been that's the reason I will eventually get one. I'll probably get one this fall because it really that's invaluable. Huh? Yeah, I like my watches, but I need one that isn't going to speak back to me, and you know, just because I can see with my wife how it motivates her to make sure she does so much movement in a day and how happy she gets when she completes the rings. I was like, I probably need that too. So that's more important to me than you being able to, like, you know, check your blood sugar at home, fasting blood sugar at home if you're not diagnosed as diabetic.
Yeah, and I'll throw in there. I'm trying not to geek out too much over technology, but there are ways in which we can actually kind of check. We have this thing called the Oura Ring, can kind of monitor your sleep and give you a sense of how much of your REM sleep. And it's not 100%, but it gives you a good sense of what your sleep efficiency is, which is important. There's other tools out there too as well that the Apple Watch will do. You'll look at what's called your heart rate recovery. You look at what's called your R-to-R interval. So your heart will beat. Every time it beats, it spikes a portion of the what we call the EKG. And so we're looking, that should have a wide swing to it, right? That says you're kind of loosey-goosey. That means you're relaxed. When it's narrow and it doesn't move a whole lot, that means you're kind of uptight. And so when you have a narrow responsiveness, it actually implies increased stress. right? And so that may be a prompter for you to kind of do some deep breathing exercises, which has been shown to increase when you exhale, you prompt your parasympathetic tone. Similar when you're in that non-REM sleep. When you get those early morning, between 10 to 12, that's when your body dives into the parasympathetic tone and what's called non-REM sleep. That's where you get that healing. That's where the vessels will dilate. When you don't get that, you still have, when you go to bed late, you lose out on that period. You'll still have smaller truncated portions, but your body never fully recovers.
Right.
This increases your risk for a lot of different events.
Absolutely.
Okay. So a question here is, we all feel down from time to time, but how do I know if I'm depressed? And Columbus, maybe you can clear the screen so that we can go big.
Oh, absolutely.
Thanks. Okay. So how do people know?
That's actually a really good question. And I think it does take some finesse, because we live in for a lot of patients I see, they think they should never be unhappy. Like they should never be uncomfortable. Yeah. Life should always be sweet. Like they should always be standing up in the middle of the field singing the hills are alive with the sound of music. And that's just not life. Life has its ups and downs. I think one of the things you have to think about is, where do the thoughts take you? Where does the feeling of being down take you? If it takes you to a place that you can't come back from, if it takes you to a place where you want to harm yourself or harm others, obviously those are significant symptoms, and that's something that you need to get checked on. If literally you don't have the energy to be you, the energy to get up and do what you need to do for the day, that is another pretty significant symptom. And if you're not able to connect to the people you're supposed to be able to connect to, coworkers, neighbors, but most importantly, spouse, family members, that's also means that you're not just down, like you're really going into depression. The beauty of the human mind is that it takes these things and it goes up and down. So you'll feel down, and then something naturally brings you back up. And when you get a death in the family, for example, you come way down, but the normal grief process over the next 6 months, you naturally come back up, you heal, and you move on. So one of the reasons sleep is so important, I'll come back to sleep, is because sleep is also the time when during certain phases of sleep, it's like it's like a natural therapist, like you heal from trauma and scars. So that's one of the reasons why if you're not sleeping well because of how bad you feel, or sleeping too much because of how bad you feel, eating too much or not eating enough because of how you feel, then it has to be taken care of. Because if you change your eating too much or you sleep too much because of how you feel, it'll actually make that worse, and you really won't get over it. So you got to get that checked out.
Great. Okay. So let's see here. I am an African-American man. Are there special health concerns that I need to be aware of?
So yeah, and so one of the things we talked about obviously prostate cancer, the increased burden and risk of prostate cancer. We spoke about the increased risk too as well for colon cancer. And so what that means is, one, of course, obviously the things that you can do on your own are the same things that you can do to kind of help protect you from diabetes, that can protect you from heart disease, which also we showed earlier are large players inside the African-American community and for men in general. And so that's going to be a large part of the foods that you eat, fiber-rich foods, right? So forget about the vegan or plant-based. If you have to chew, and I always describe it, if it's going to eat the celebrities of the food aisle, right, that have singular names like Beyonce, like Madonna, like Braun. So you eat broccoli and you eat kale and you're having blueberries and you're having raspberries. Those are the celebrities, and they come with them. They come with their own bodyguards. We call them antioxidants. They help fight off and defend against all these nefarious types of things that are attacking your body. And so that's what you have to be most concerned with. And so screening becomes important. And that can be hard because guess what? This is what we were talking about. You have to go in and go to your primary care doc. And that can be hard. Those hours sometimes are during work days when you have to work, and taking time off or being persistent, because you have to be an advocate for you. That means that if they have you on hold and you get disconnected, you can't be like, oh, well, forget it. No, you have to be an advocate for you and fight for your health and for your life and for the future. And that's what I would tell folks.
Okay. Last question here. What is my prostate, and why is its health important to me?
You want to start, Columbus, or?
Sure. Yeah. So basically what you're going to have is you have what's extending from your bladder, right? Which is a large sac that feeds in from your kidneys, all the fluids and so forth. And then it's going to pass through for men, your penis in order to urinate, and you're passing out there. So it's passing out through a straw. Think of it as straw. It's called the urethra. And you have enclosed around that, you have this muscle, and that's the prostate that can become inflamed. It can become enlarged. And so just like on the straw, if something's impinging on the straw, the fluid doesn't go down there quite as easily. So for men, as their prostate enlarges, they may have what we call urinary retention or hesitancy, and they're having to constantly go to the bathroom and on a frequent basis. Or there may be issues where now you have abnormal growth. So what cancer is you just have abnormal growth that starts to happen. Anything in the body that begins to thicken and grow out of proportion typically grows abnormally in an abnormal fashion. Like, think of it like if you start having relations outside your marriage, that's an abnormal relation. It's going to lead to problems, right? That's going to lead to problems for sure. It's going to lead to problems.
That's right.
So same sort of thing when it comes to like growth in your body that begins to increase outside the normal boundaries. It leads to problems of cancer or other issues. And so that's what the prostate is. And that's how it can become, it can lead to problems in men, what we call benign prostatic hypertrophy, BPH, or it can lend itself over towards actually developing cancer.
And one of the reasons why this is so important is because men will understand that mammary glands or breasts are key glandular tissue in a woman. And one of the places we really worry about breast cancer appearing. The prostate in many ways is like the male equivalent in some ways, in that it is also very sensitive to hormones like testosterone. And secretes things that actually come out in ejaculate for a man. And the reason it's so important to watch for it was just mentioned. It is a gland that, just like the breast can have cancer, it can get cancer. And they're slow growing cancers, but that's why it has to be checked out. You have to know what kind of cancer it is, what kind of treatment you want to do for it. And so there's an anatomical piece that Dr. Batiste talked about. Cutting off the urethra, you have problems peeing, causes all kind of problems. But then there's also that other piece that he mentioned, which from a lot of men, they'll understand it better if they think that's where you have your hormone sensitive gland that can also become cancerous, just like a woman's breast.
Okay, fantastic. Those are all the questions that I have. Thank you.
All right. Very good. All right, man. Another good conversation.
Yeah.
Let's end this one off with like your top 3 recommendations for men out there. What do you want them to do?
I think number 1. Well, I'll start with number 3. Number 3, have a strong group of guys around you. Have a den of men, of other lions that you can go to, and our pride is what they call it, a pride alliance, and you can go to. And you can be genuine, authentic. There's no competition, and people are supporting you and listening to you when you hurt. Second, don't avoid the doctor. Don't avoid the tests. Make sure that you're plugged in and you know what your numbers are at the right times, and that you're doing the lifestyle things, eating, sleeping, all of those things that we talked about, exercise, being in healthy relationships. We didn't get a chance to talk about that a lot. But a bad relationship, a bad marital relationship, a bad parent-child relationship, a child-parent relationship also makes you sick. So make sure your relationships are good. I'll stick a lot into number 2 so I can do this for number 1. And that is, have a right connection with God. Make sure you have spiritual health, because the world is sometimes just too much for us to carry on our own. You need to have somebody a higher power is the way they say it in AA, to cry out to help you carry the burdens of this life.
Yes. Well, I mean, you hit the nail on the head with everything that's there. I'll just kind of add briefly to it in terms of, I would say, sleep, right? Absolutely. Sleep is like just the golden chain that connects us with health. We look at that when we get that good sleep, it's going to help provide us with testosterone that we need. It's going to help us with growth hormone that we need. It's going to help lower the cholesterol, the cortisol. It's going to do all the things that we needed to do, lower the blood pressure, improve our blood sugar, help us with weight loss, and interact with the stress hormone. So sleep is so powerful. It helps stave off dementia, it helps clear our brain, improve our memory. Sleep is powerful amongst all of the chronic diseases that impact men. The second thing I would say too as well is exercise outdoors. And I mentioned outdoors because we're able to get sunlight, and in nature, the power of being in nature and the cognitive benefits that are there by getting engaged out there. So important that vitamin D and just the activity that's there and fighting cancer has been proven time and time again. And last, just to echo what you mentioned, I'll say the intimacy of relationships, of vulnerable relationships is what I would say, right? Because when you're vulnerable, that means you're not being superficial. That means you're getting down and you're exposing who you are and you're allowing yourself to be hurt, right? That means you trust someone if you're going to allow them to see where they can hurt you and you're exposing some of those things. And so I'm not saying do it to everyone, but I'm saying having at least somebody that you can be vulnerable with is important. Yeah.
Very good point.
But this has been good. That's again, this is important information. I learned something when we get on together, right? I learned something.
Same here.
I hope that people out there who are watching, share it, like it, pass it along. If you love a man, share it. If you are a man, share it. Any of these things like that. We want you out there playing this role, doing everything you can. Anyway, it's been good. We have to do this again. We're gonna be back in. Are we gonna be back in July?
We sure will.
You're the traveler. I'm actually on hiatus. I'm trying to.
I'm on hiatus. The first 3 weeks of July, I'm home. So let's make sure we knock it out in early July.
Yeah. All right. So we'll get that. So we'll be here. I think maybe we might even try and slip in a live show.
Yeah, we can slip in a live one.
Okay. We're gonna hook up with live ones. So make sure you all stay tuned. Check this episode out. Definitely. You already are doing this. Share it. But stay tuned for our July episode. Looking forward to great things. We'll see you soon.